Clayton Smith here. I'm a cybersecurity specialist with Cisco and wanted to come to you today to talk about something that a lot of our customers I know are very interested in. How do we improve our overall security posture while utilizing endpoint security? Well, enter Cisco Secure Endpoint. Cisco Secure Endpoint is the new name for what used to be named Advanced Malware Protection for Endpoints, or AMP for Endpoints. So you may already be familiar with it. But where we really differentiate ourselves is our ability to go not just from an endpoint protection or detection and response platform, but also moving that to an XDR platform by integrating all of the different components within your security stack so you can have a complete picture of what's going on in your environment from a security standpoint, but especially from a malware standpoint. So let's take a little bit deeper look into Cisco Secure Endpoint.
To do that, I'm going to start from SecureX. SecureX is our visibility, orchestration, and XDR platform that comes included with any of your Cisco security solutions. So let's start here. You can notice that I can see all of my different Cisco security solutions, as well as a whole host of integrations, both third-party and Cisco related. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump directly into the AMP for Endpoints dashboard. Now I could do this by simply clicking on any alerts that I see in the AMP for Endpoints area here, or what I'm going to do is use the ribbon at the bottom here to jump directly into Cisco Secure Endpoints, or like I said, we're in the process of a name change, so AMP for Endpoints. Launch. So here you'll see that I've opened into my dashboard, and immediately I'm having a bad day. I hope you never see a dashboard that looks like this. Keep in mind, this is a lot of demo data that I've put into my environment. So I can look at from a very high level overview, I can see my whole environment, jump into quarantine events, look at my different groups. I can actually set these groups up. So maybe I could have a server group, for instance, and an endpoint group. I can also go to the Overview tab, which is another great graphical representation of everything that's going on for AMP for Endpoints. Now, while this is loading out, you might be asking yourself, well, how does AMP for Endpoints or Secure Endpoints detect malware? Well, there's over 15 different ways that we do that. But some of the big ways are going to be, we certainly use AV definitions. We also have the ability to do, we inspect every file, assign it a hash, and then do hash inspection. So we compare that against our Talos database of all known malicious files. And then we also use machine learning to look at behavior. So if we see something that is acting like ransomware, for instance, then we can absolutely report on that, block that instance, and stop it from happening just based on the behavior. But there's a whole other list. So this solution really does replace any of your next-gen endpoint protection solutions, and especially all of your old antivirus solutions that were signature-based. We have the ability to do offline detection as well. So from here, I'm actually going to pivot in. We're going to do an investigation utilizing the data that AMP or Secure Endpoints is able to actually gather from each one of the different endpoints. Now keep in mind, when I talk endpoints, I'm talking Windows, Mac, PC, you name it. It's a client that runs on those machines. But let's go back in time quite quickly and say we want to do an investigation on WannaCry. I want to see if any of my machines have WannaCry. Now in this case, I'm going to use the Talos Intelligence blog that has all these different indications of compromise associated with WannaCry. Now in your case, you could simply do this from any place that has indications of compromise. So there's plenty of different threat intelligence blogs that are out there that might have different indications of compromise. But for this purpose, I'm going to go and copy those and go back into AMP for Endpoints, and I'm going to go back to my security ribbon, to my SecureX ribbon, and I'm going to launch Threat Response. Now both SecureX and Threat Response come with our Cisco security solutions. So Threat Response is going to look across my whole security installation, and it's going to look for any of those indications of compromise. So we click Investigate, and we'll speed it up as it runs through the investigation. So now that my investigation is finished, you can see that there are 2 targets that have WannaCry within my environment. I can see it both here because it says 2 targets, but also I can see it down below where I can actually see how this device in particular is affected by all of the different hash values that I see, as well as any associated file paths, or if there was command and control activity, I would see that through Umbrella, for instance. But in this case, I notice that this endpoint certainly has been infected with some malicious hash values that I'm aware of. So now I want to see, okay, since it shows that those endpoints have had those hash values, now let's click here and I want to see, did we successfully quarantine those? So I'm going to go through and do device trajectory and AMP for endpoints. And this is going to tell me exactly what happened with those files and that malware. So you'll notice that I have all of these where there is red. It actually has detected something malicious happening. In this case, because this is a demo environment, it has allowed these files to continue to run, these executables to continue to run. But we will see very quickly that just by clicking on this, I come over to the right-hand side over event details, and I'll notice this file was indeed quarantined. So very quickly, I'm able to establish, utilizing the data that exists within Cisco Secure Endpoints, I'm able to see if I have any devices that actually have a given piece of malware, incident, or breach. And I'm also able to then pivot back into Cisco Secure Endpoints to be able to determine that the solution did work as planned and it has been quarantined, so there's nothing more for me to worry about. So that was with data that exists within Cisco Secure Endpoints. What about situations where maybe the data didn't originate from Cisco Secure Endpoints? Maybe it came from another Cisco security solution. Let's take a look at that. Let's say that you come into SecureX and you have Umbrella, and you look at these different security blocks by malware category. So Umbrella is indicating that you have some sort of malware in the environment based on the network traffic that it's seeing out to the internet. Let's click on this one that shows 9 at this time period. So what we're going to do is now we're going to transition into the Umbrella dashboard, and I want to do some investigation, see what were those 9 different incidents that happened during that time frame. So it's going to bring me directly into that section. So once here, the one that I want to focus on is this one right here. This is malware. It was blocked by infrastructure because it was an infrastructure block. Let's take a look at this domain. So again, this is something that we saw in our network. I want to learn more about this domain. So when I come in here, it's going to tell me everything I know, but I want to investigate this. And the key point about investigation is Investigate's going to go and tell us everything that we know from Cisco Talos about this given domain. And so I want to see, okay, that's the only one that's reached out through Umbrella, but do I have any other issues here? You know, all these are associated samples of malware that has generated from this domain. So I want to do an investigation and say, okay, even though I've only had one system actually reach out to this domain, are there other instances of malware that may have come from this domain? And so that's where the power of AMP is going to come in. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start an investigation by finding all of the observables on this page. It's going to look through this whole page and pull out every one of these things: domains, email addresses, and especially what I'm looking at as it pertains to right now is that SHA-256 signature. And I'll pop those into threat response. I'm just going to click investigate in threat response, and it's going to cross-launch me into threat response and look for those indications of compromise. And now we'll let this run, and I'll speed this up. All right, so now that this investigation is done, it may not look like a lot, but right here, what this is telling me is exactly what I wanted to know. What I wanted to know is, of any of the different SHA-256 hashes that were associated with malware that was known to come from this domain, did any of my PCs or any of my endpoints, did they show that SHA-256? Did they have that hash on the computer? And the good news is, just simply by looking at the number of targets, I have 0 targets. I don't see anything that would be indicative of having a machine here that's infected. So very quickly, what I know is that based on this research right here that I've done, let me go back one. Based on the fact that I did have one request that went to this known malicious domain, I did an investigation on that, found related files and related hashes that may be associated with that domain that could have malware, and then simply going and saying, I want to see if any of that malware that has been associated with that domain exists on my systems. And from a very quick search, I can tell there are 0 targets in my environment. So I can feel pretty good because of AMP for endpoints and the granularity of the data that it gives me, or excuse me, secure endpoints, the granularity of the data that it gives me, that I know that I'm clean.
So there are 2 final elements of secure endpoint that I want to bring your attention to. The first is called Rapid Threat Containment. Rapid Threat Containment is a Cisco security solution that allows, when we determine that there is a piece of malware on an endpoint, we can communicate that with both Cisco Secure Endpoint to shut down network connectivity, but we can also make that communication to Cisco ISE and other solutions so that we can actually stop that piece of malware from going across your organization. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is something that I alluded to earlier within SecureX, which is the orchestration component within SecureX. So just think about the capability of having an orchestration platform that's included with your Cisco security solution. So where you can take human, repetitive tasks that people don't like to do, and frankly playbooks that become out of date probably the second they're published, and move that into a full orchestration platform that's included, again, where you can have an alert from Secure Endpoint, for instance, kick off a whole series of tasks, including integration into ServiceNow, other Cisco security solutions, and many, many third-party solutions, maybe email, maybe WebEx Teams, for instance. So all of that exists within the Cisco Secure Endpoints portfolio. Thanks for taking the time to learn a little bit more with me about Cisco Secure Endpoint Protection. I hope this has been really helpful. And keep in mind, this is a solution that allows you to not just see just the endpoint, but allows us to use other solutions to bind that together to give you greater threat efficacy. We're the only one in the industry that's truly doing this. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, your cybersecurity sales specialist, your account manager, or your solutions architect. We'd love to help answer more questions about not only Cisco Secure Endpoint Protection, but also any of the Cisco security solutions within our portfolio. Thank you and have a great day.